In Section 3, you will learn about key points to keep in mind, where workplace sexual harassment can occur, workplace bullying, and understanding gender harassment. Let's review some key points to keep in mind. Everyone interprets events based upon their own background, experiences, and sense of personal space and privacy. You cannot be sure that someone will interpret your questionable behavior as innocent. Remember the reasonable person standard. Other people will get to decide. Current events will be interpreted in light of subsequent events.
Harassment can occur whenever and wherever employees are observing their work responsibilities, including in the field, at any employer-sponsored event. Also at trainings and conferences open to the public and office parties. Employment interactions during non-work hours, such as at a hotel while traveling or at events after work, can have an impact in the workplace. Locations off-site and off-hour activities can be considered extensions of the work environment. It's important to remember that traveling for company business or in the role as a company employee means you are always in the workplace. Employees can be the target of sexual harassment through calls, texts, email, and social media. Harassing behavior that in any way affects the work environment is rightly the concern of management. Workplace bullying is the deliberate, repeated, hurtful verbal mistreatment of a person, the target, by a cruel perpetrator. A bully can be a co-worker or a superior, and can be a male or a female. Bullying, cyberbullying, general harassment, is more prevalent than sexual harassment and discrimination. One factor that places workers at risk for violence is dealing with violent people or a volatile situation. A recent study estimates that 1 in 5 U.S. workers has experienced destructive bullying in the past year. Bullying, cyberbullying, and related behaviors may be addressed in a single law, or may be addressed in multiple laws. Bullying is illegal when it violates federal or state laws prohibiting discrimination and harassment in the workplace. The characteristics to look for in bullying are repeated infliction of verbal abuse, such as the use of derogatory remarks, insults, and epithets, verbal or physical conduct that a reasonable person would find threatening, intimidating, or humiliating, or the gratuitous sabotage or undermining of a person's work performance. It is up to your employer as well as you and your colleagues to self-monitor and ensure your colleagues that no one in the workplace is suffering at the hands of a bully, and that appropriate and adequate action is always taken. When someone snaps at you, or ignores you because they are under pressure, or in a bad mood, that is not bullying. Bullying involves persistent, abusive, and frightening behavior designed to make the target feel upset, humiliated, and threatened. The following profile fits most bullies: blames others for errors, makes unreasonable demands, criticizes the workability of others in front of others, inconsistent enforcement of arbitrary rules, threats of job loss, insults, and put-downs, downplays or denies accomplishments, and creates social exclusion. Workplace bullying takes many forms. Here are a few examples. Molly works in sales. Her job requires her to meet particular sales goals. In group sales meetings, Molly's boss, John, insults her when she fails to meet her goals. Over the course of the next month, John continues to berate her in front of her colleagues and encourages them to join in on jokes that refer to her as stupid, incompetent, or ugly. When Molly speaks to John about his behavior, he states that it is simply humor, and she should get a thicker skin. Molly feels humiliated and has trouble sleeping. Michael works in an office. For weeks, his co-worker Thomas has made it clear he does not like Michael. When it is necessary for them to speak, Thomas stands over Michael or invades his personal space. In group meetings, Thomas talks over Michael or interrupts him whenever Michael attempts to speak. On their lunch break, Thomas encourages his co-workers not to sit with Michael or speak to him. Thomas constantly and loudly gossips about Michael in front of co-workers. Michael now suffers from severe anxiety every time he walks into work. Joseph is an accountant at a large accounting firm and he is experiencing difficulties with his supervisor, Patricia. She has written him up several times for non-existent performance issues and consistently insulted the quality of his work even though colleagues insist his work is of high quality. Patricia has also assigned Joseph tasks with impossible deadlines and then berated Joseph loudly in front of his colleagues when the task is not completed. She has also repeatedly denied his requests for both training and leave. This has been going on for months. Joseph is stressed and has slipped into a depression. Stephanie is a nurse in a large medical office. For over a year, she has been having trouble with a co-worker named Dog. Dog has reported Stephanie numerous times to management, falsely claiming that Stephanie made mistakes in her work. The claims were all dismissed. Stephanie has repeatedly found her tools and equipment either missing or moved around, making it difficult for her to do her job. Stephanie regularly overhears Dawn talking with co-workers about how pathetic and stupid Stephanie is. Stephanie feels sick with anxiety and shame and has begun missing work.
Gender stereotyping occurs when conduct or personality traits are considered inappropriate, simply because they may not conform to other people's ideas or perceptions about how individuals of either gender should act or look. Harassing a person because that person does not conform to gender stereotypes as to appropriate looks, speech, personality, or lifestyle is considered sexual harassment. The following terms define characteristics in gender expression and identity. Gender expression is considered a person's gender-related appearance or behavior, whether or not stereotypically associated with the person's sex at birth. Gender identity is a person's identification as male, female, a gender different from the person's sex at birth, or transgender. Transgender is a general term that refers to a person whose gender identity differs from the person's sex at birth. A transgender person may or may not have a gender expression that is different from the person's sex at birth, or transgender. A transgender person may or may not identify as transsexual. Social transition involves a process of socially aligning one's gender with the internal sense of self. For example, changes in name and pronoun, bathroom facility usage, participation in activities like sports teams. Physical transition refers to medical treatments an individual may undergo to physically align their body with internal sense of self. For example, hormone therapies or surgical procedures. A person does not need to complete any particular step in a gender transition in order to be protected by the law. An employer may not condition its treatment or accommodation of a transitioning employee upon completion of a particular step in a gender transition. Gender stereotyping is an assumption about a person's appearance or behavior, or about an individual's ability or inability to perform certain kinds of work based on myth, social expectation, or generalization about the individual's gender. Sex, gender, gender identity, and gender expression are considered independent of the others. For example, the same person may have the sex of male, which was assigned at birth, B the gender identity of female, and C the gender expression of masculine with variations like butch, femme, transgender, genderqueer, or non-conforming queer. An additional, separate aspect of the same person is sexual orientation. Staying with our example, one can have the assigned sex at birth of male, the gender identity of female, a masculine gender expression, and an orientation of gay, lesbian, or heterosexual. In addition, one may change or transition one's gender, gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation throughout life. Gender identity and gender expression are protected characteristics under the Fair Employment and Housing Act. That means that employers, housing providers, and businesses may not discriminate against someone because they identify as transgender or gender non-conforming. This includes the perception that someone is transgender or gender non-conforming. What is an employer allowed to ask? Employers may ask about an employee's employment history, and may ask for personal references, in addition to other non-discriminatory questions. An interviewer should not ask questions designed to detect a person's gender identity, including asking about their marital status, spouse's name, or relation of household members to one another. Employers should not ask questions about a person's body or whether they plan to have surgery. How do employers implement dress codes and grooming standards? An employer who requires a dress code must enforce it in a non-discriminatory manner. This means that, unless an employer can demonstrate business necessity, each employee must be allowed to dress in accordance with their gender identity and gender expression. Transgender or gender non-conforming employees may not be held to any different standard of dress or grooming than any other employee. What are the obligations of employers when it comes to bathrooms, showers, and locker rooms? All employees have a right to safe and appropriate restroom and locker room facilities. This includes the right to use a restroom or a locker room that corresponds to the employee's gender identity, regardless of the employee's assigned sex at birth. In addition, where possible, an employer should provide an easily accessible unisex single-stall bathroom for use by any employee who desires increased privacy, regardless of the underlying reason. Use of a unisex single-stall restroom should always be a matter of choice. No employee should be forced to use one either as a matter of policy or due to harassment in a gender-appropriate facility. Unless exempted by other provisions of state law, all single-user toilet facilities in any business establishment, place of public accommodation or state or local government agency must be identified as all-gender toilet facilities. Gender discrimination involves treating someone, an applicant or employee, unfavorably because of that person's gender. Harassment because someone is performing a job that is usually performed, or was performed in the past, mostly by persons of a different gender, is also considered gender discrimination. Discrimination against an individual because of gender identity, including transgender status, or because of sexual orientation is considered discrimination. The law forbids discrimination when it comes to any aspect of employment. This includes job pay, job assignments, hiring, promotions, firing, layoff, training, fringe benefits, and any other term or condition of employment. The law prohibits harassment of employees, applicants, and independent contractors, and requires employers to take all reasonable steps to prevent harassment from occurring. Let's take a look at an example of gender discrimination. Carla works as a licensed heavy equipment operator. Some of her male co-workers think it is funny to tease her. Carla often hears comments like, "Watch out, here she comes, that crazy woman driver," in a joking manner. Also, someone keeps putting a handmade sign on the only porta potty at the worksite that says, "Men only." Should women in traditionally male jobs expect teasing and not take the joking comments too seriously? Whether Carla is being harassed depends in part on Carla's opinion of the situation. That is, whether she finds the behavior offensive. However, if at any point Carla does feel harassed, she is entitled to complain of the behavior and have it stopped. Regardless of whether and for how long she has endured the behavior without complaint. Carla can always say when enough is enough. Carla feels that she cannot complain because the site supervisor sometimes joins in with the joking behavior. Where can she go? Carla can still complain to the supervisor, who is then on notice that the behavior bothers Carla and must be stopped. The supervisor's failure to take Carla's complaint seriously constitutes serious misconduct on his or her part. Carla can also complain directly to the person designated by her employer to receive complaints, either instead of going to the supervisor, or after doing so. The employer is responsible for assuring that all employees are aware of its anti-harassment policies and procedures. Some of Carla's other co-workers are strongly opposed to her presence in the traditionally all-male profession. These co-workers have sometimes said things to her like, "You're taking a job away from a man who deserves it. You should be home with your kids. And what kind of a mother are you?" Also, someone scratched the word bitch on Carla's toolbox. Are these behaviors, while rude, considered sexual harassment since they are not sexual in nature? The behaviors are directed at her because she is a woman and appear to be intended to intimidate her and cause her to quit her job. While not sexual in nature, this harassment is because of her sex and will create a hostile work environment if it is sufficiently severe or frequent. Carla complains about the jokes and other behaviors, and an investigation is conducted. It cannot be determined who defaced Carla's toolbox. Her co-workers are told to stop their behavior or face disciplinary charges. The supervisor speaks with Carla and tells her to come to him immediately if she has any further problems. Carla then finds that someone has urinated in her toolbox. What should Carla do, since she can't prove who vandalized her toolbox? Carla should speak to her supervisor immediately, or contact any other person designated by her employer to receive complaints directly. Although the situation has become very difficult, it is the employer's responsibility to support Carla and seek a solution. An appropriate investigation must be promptly undertaken, and appropriate remedial action must follow.